I ask people to take an introspective kind of moment, just kind of look at their lives, and then just kind of imagine the kind of sacrifices they would have to make if they were to go in the military. And then think about all the people that are your age that made those sacrifices, that did all these different things. Reacclimating themselves to a civilian life, or reacclimating themselves to being in the United States in general. You know, people that have gone places and then done an extraordinarily stressful thing and been in, you know, hyper-stressful environments, it changes everything.
Most of us were up through the Depression. Patriotism was very high at that time. So most of us, if we didn't have a job, would say, well, we'll go into the service. And there was a couple of other fellas that were from Waterbury that went to high school with me, and they were going in, so we all went in about the same time.
All the men in my family had been Marines. My grandfather was a Marine in the 1930s, and he went to China. I had a grand uncle who was a Marine in World War II. In the South Pacific, and then my father and my uncle and all their friends were Marines in Vietnam era 1960s. So it's just something I grew up with, and I always knew I was going to be a Marine. So I enlisted 2 weeks after my 17th birthday.
As a child, I was raised on a long history of family service, both in the civilian sector as police and fire and emergency responders, as well as a long military tradition in our family of military service that dates back to the Civil War.
It was a very tough time during the Vietnam War, and there were people being drafted out of my classes for service in the Army. So I decided, well, to guarantee finishing college, I'll sign up for ROTC. So I joined when I was a sophomore, my sophomore year.
The Vietnam War was going on. I was in college, and recruiters came on campus. And I didn't take up on it. I graduated, I went and taught, but I kept having this little nagging thing in the back of my mind. The war is going on, I'd really like to help my country, and I called the recruiter.
Well, when I was growing up, I was always in and around boats, and I was always fascinated with seeing the merchant marine ships flying the foreign flags. And I thought, when I get up and old enough, I want to go to sea. I want to be in the merchant marine and sail around the world. Well, I couldn't get into any of the merchant marine academies because of my eyesight. So after college, I joined the Navy.
I didn't really like the idea of being a rifleman first, so I looked into other branches to see what would be like the most advanced program that they had available to like really kind of push my career in one direction or another. And then I found the Navy's nuclear power program, and I talked to the Navy recruiter, who of course, you know, sold me all on it because that's what their job is, and they're really good at it. And yeah, that's why I went into the Navy.
We all know the atomic bomb is very dangerous. Since it may be used against us, we must get ready.
You know, looking at the time frame, the era of why I joined, the time when I joined, it was the Cuban Missile Crisis.
It's a bomb. Duck and cover.
When I was a kid, we were doing bomb drills. JFK was assassinated. We have terrorism today. Back then, it was communism.
Not appear that there's any kind of an effort up there yet. Now remember, oh my God.
I was 10th grade when 9/11 happened.
That looks like a second plane.
And it was kind of, you know, a big moment in my life. And before leaving school that day, my best friend and I decided that we would join, at least do our part, join the service. And so I joined right after high school, and he went ROTC at college, and he's in the Army now.
The completion of ROTC, you become an officer. My father was an officer in the Navy, my mother was an officer in the Navy, my brother was an officer in the Army.
My grandfather was in the Army Air Corps, and he was also a firefighter for over 60 years. And the Air Force gave me that opportunity to be a firefighter. When I got to the recruiter, that was a big draw for me, was becoming a firefighter.
Why did you make that choice to volunteer?
That's what a soldier does.
So
You mentioned a little bit about your training, the different places you went to train.
Yep.
Can you tell me a little bit about those training experiences?
Wow.
What was it like? Do you remember what your first days in the Air Force were like? Tell me a little bit. How were those first days in the Army? What was it like?
It's a shocker.
It was kind of a shock.
Kind of scary.
It was a lot of getting yelled at.
What the heck did we get ourselves into?
Talk about a really stressful environment.
They always usually give you a cadre down there from the south, a field grade corporal. And they know how to make it terrible.
I got off the bus at Fort Dix, and the guy next to me passed out, hit the ground. So I bent over to pick him up, and the guy on the other side bent over to pick him up. And Sergeant, in no short order, said, "Who told you to move?"
I was from Philadelphia, so this was the first time I was really ever away from home.
Going from a small town in Maine to all of a sudden you're in the Navy with a whole bunch of different groups of people you've never encountered before, and people, using different language, talking about places you've never been, and you're just, now you start talking about nuclear technology.
I met these 50 other women from all around the country who basically had the same ideals I did, that they wanted to do something to serve their country. We were all college graduates. We had different majors and stuff like that, and we went through training. The idea that you all ate together, you had to march from your barracks to where you ate, to where you took the classes. That whole thing was just very foreign to women at that time, but it was a very enjoyable experience being with those people.
We did learn to bivouac. We learned to handle emergencies such as plane crashes. We learned about tropical diseases.
So what they do is they just put everybody in the same pot, and they take all of your individuality away, and they teach you how to become a soldier. Yes, sir. No, sir. The first commands.
It's indoctrinating you into that. There's a checklist. I need to use it. I need to follow it. The forced tedium.
You were exposed to decision-making that did not have anyone to fall back on.
It shifted from going from mostly like mechanical engineering to more reactor theory and physics and stuff like that, and thermodynamics. The mandatory study hours per week, I had typically averaged about 20 in addition to the class time I was already taking, but by the end it was more like 30, 35 every week.
Officer Candidate School is a lot more about problem solving, giving you contradictory requirements or contradictory information, or giving you two things at once and you have to prioritize them. It's a lot of problem solving under the sleep deprivation and grueling conditions.
Weaponry, you actually had map readings and things of that nature. So they give you the basic courses of a field man, somebody that's going to be out in the field. So,
Training skills, because officers do a lot of training, to combat skills, infantryman skills, how to fight a battle. A lot of leadership management skills were imparted.
From the moment you begin training, I think the second word out of your mouth is kill. It's all about kill. And it's all about just posturing up and aggression, building aggression. You build anger. You build anger at an enemy that you haven't even seen. And when you throw a hand grenade, when you're on the rifle range, when you're, doing the bayonet training, all of these things are all about either killing or preventing someone from being killed.
At the time, it seemed daunting, but now, after my career in the Marine Corps, and having been the place I've been and done what I've done, it actually doesn't seem like it was that difficult. It was more an introduction than it doesn't get any easier after OCS.
And I arrived at Oakland Army Terminal, and basically we had no duty. We were in transition. We were on our way to Vietnam. They were getting our airplane tickets arranged and all that kind of stuff. And I was touring the base. We had post privilege, you know, we were allowed to walk around the base. And I walked into this this area where there were these huge hangars. And one of the doors was open. And it was filled top to bottom with aluminum caskets. And that message told me, this is serious stuff. Those are not just sitting here to collect dust.
When you hit that beach, they had the barbed wires and everything else, and up above you see the machine gun go, ping, 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 going overhead. You didn't dare stick your head up. We were in the 6th wave. Somebody's got me in the 5th, I think, but I think it was the 6th. We had 3 going in. The one on the left got knocked right out with an 88 from the top of that mountain. And we were all down there just as soon as that landed. But what happened is, see, they bombed so they could make ditches so we could drop in when we landed. But what happened, the tide went out. So we had that much farther to go in and there was no holes. And this is why we lost the first 2 waves. They got wiped out, and then when you get in, you're laying between bodies just trying to crawl up to get around and everything else. And then this is where we learned, and this is where we learned combat. You can't blame the German soldiers. See, that's one thing I expressed to the people. The Germans were one thing, the Nazis were another thing. The SS, we would never take them prisoners. But as far as the soldiers themselves, they were soldiers like we were. A lot of them were forced into the army. Yeah. If they didn't, they know they were going into concentration camps, so they had to fight. The SS are the ones that were bad. We would never take any of them prisoners. For what they did for them people in there and everything else, gas them and throw them out there, all bones and everything else, nothing on them or anything. You had to regurgitate. I threw up and everything else was as strong as my stomach was and everything. You've got to do it.
One of those deuce and a half, 2.5 ton trucks had driven accidentally, I guess, driven off a cliff with 2 Army Rangers and 9 Afghan Army personnel in it. And I think we were able to save 7 of them. That was on the Air Force Achievement Medal that I won for Afghanistan.
Parts of our unit were surrounded at various times, more often than not. It was just a really bad situation for the simple reason that U.S. forces had never engaged the North Vietnamese Army. These are well trained. These are trained by Chinese and Soviet. They have the best equipment. They're all outfitted with, you know, the RPGs, the hand grenades, the machine guns, and the damn bugles. The bugles are a killer.
How so?
It's a psychological weapon. When you hear these horns from everywhere, it could only be one person over there blowing a horn. But that's not what you think. You're thinking it's like there's a horde. There's 1,000 of them. You know, it's like the Huns are. You're being invaded. You know, you're being overrun. And essentially, we were at a point that the first Cav was overrun.
You had to adapt. There was nobody to turn to. You were the ultimate decision maker, and you hoped and prayed that you made the proper decisions.
In those types of situations, you really stop thinking as a human being, and you start thinking more as something like a battle computer, if you want to call it that.
The concentration on the task at hand really was what it came down to, is that you had a job to do, and you knew that if you didn't do your job, then it was going to mean, you know, one of your friends could pay the price.
And to have camaraderie, if your buddy is going through it, you go through it. So it's a sense that they're helping you get through without you being alone.
I had a very unusual job, in fact a unique job at the time. I was in charge of a team of Marines, and we built and trained and led in combat the first Iraqi Army battalion that was trained by the U.S. military. And it was done at a time when nobody knew if it could be done. It had never been done before. And the last Westerner to lead Arabs in combat was T.E. Lawrence in World War I, better known as Lawrence of Arabia. So, we were really in uncharted territory here. We started taking machine gun fire from a house down the street. A couple of insurgents, a little bit down the street and catty corner to us, had come out of an alley with an RPG. They had time to get a shot off, and I remember seeing the round coming at me. I don't remember much after that, except I don't know if I recovered consciousness or what, but I was lying in the street, and I felt like these pricks on my face, and I couldn't move and I couldn't talk, and I realized that there was a sniper shooting at me while I was lying there. I thought that was it for me. But the other two Marines broke cover under fire to come get me, and they dragged me back and they put me up against a wall, and there was blood everywhere, and I didn't realize that I was hit. I thought I'd been knocked down. They were covered in blood, and they said, "Who's hit?" And I was against the wall, and I looked at the wall, and there's a big bloody body print. And I said, "Oh boy, I think that's me. I think I'm in big trouble." I was in over 100 firefights, more than 3 dozen shellings, a dozen IEDs.
After a while you go into combat, after a while it gets to you, And then when you got to fight and everything else, then you go through it, you get worse.
Military people understand the term 1,000 yard stare. There was a lot of that. And being a new kid on the block, you don't know who to talk to.
I'd been worrying about dying for about 5 years. And think about it. Every day you get up and you know that you're going to be killed doing this job. Nothing meant anything during that period of time when you're trapped. You can't think of a future. I mean, there is none, because tomorrow it may be gone. So you think today, and you will, I'll have finished tomorrow, and then you finish tomorrow. So one day.
In the age when I came home, the VA hospitals were not prepared to deal with what they call post-traumatic stress disorder, or issues associated with serving in combat. They could work with the physical injuries to a degree. They couldn't work with the psychological injuries so good. There was always a sense of isolation.
And the old expression about never going home again is true. Because I got back to my hometown, all my friends are gone. They've moved on to other towns, other things. I'm home, and the first thing that struck me was how alone I was.
How has your service and your experience in war affected your life now?
I was in a bad way when I got back, and when I was retired from the Marine Corps, initially temporarily and then permanently, I was having difficulty holding a job. For me, what really kept me going, what made me passionate, why I woke up in the morning, was to help the people who were coming back from the war and having difficulty, the same difficulties I had.
How did your service and what you've done before, how does that affect how you conduct your life now?
I think I'm a lot more goal-oriented. As I said, accomplishing the task was always priority number one, and I guess in the past I used to get distracted a lot more, but now I see that, when something's got to get done, then it has to get done no matter what. If it involves not going to sleep that night, or whatever hardship that it may involve, you still need to accomplish that task. It
kind of makes me value the opportunities I have now much more so. So I'm much more, motivated to take advantage of and make more opportunities for myself.
I think that veterans are an undervalued asset in our society. And so my goal is to sort of properly value them, initially locally in my slice of the world here in Connecticut, and then, hopefully nationally.
I hate war, and that's why I do so much to make sure that those who experience it can recover from it.
Well, I certainly think being thrust into a system and situation of intense responsibility very early on after leaving residency, it better prepared me for the responsibilities that lay ahead.
You had to respond to extraordinary stressful situations. So on the one hand, now I handle stress so much better. I feel a lot more assertive. My work ethic is beyond what I thought it even was at the time, and I thought I was doing pretty well when I graduated high school.
It really taught me a lot about leadership and being a leader. And when I got into the real world, as they called it, you probably know that term, I could take those skills that they taught me and I practiced in the Army and used them in my career. So I went very quickly, very high up in the company that I joined. Also, they taught me teaching skills and how to teach specifically adults.
During that time, I got to meet so many different people from all around the country. I think that is the thing that really shaped the rest of my life.
Going through military training and living the military life is you learn to stand on your own 2 feet. You learn to be able to make decisions, live with your decisions, and the ability to learn throughout your entire life.
It's made me a stronger person, I think, with regard to being able to make quick decisions. And then I went on, in my civilian career to become a medic, which was, there are a couple of motives for that. It was payback. As opposed to taking lives, I learned how to save lives. And that was, to me, that was gratification. And I was really, really good at what I did.
I think it calls down to one word: camaraderie. You see a veteran out there and you want to be able to help the veteran. And a lot of times people forget what a veteran is all about.
It's allowed me to focus and amplify everything positive.
If I didn't go to the military, I probably wouldn't have that kind of motivation to keep doing that, keep pushing myself to do more.
It's easier to honor the dead than care for the living. Let's not just honor the living, but care for the living. I would challenge everybody who is watching this to take up that mantle.
I hope that America remembers to always be proud of their veterans, no matter what time they served, and that we will always keep them in our hearts and our prayers.
Do me a favor. When you see a veteran, and you know he's a veteran, he's got a hat on or whatever, just shake his hand. I think I said that on one of our, at the presentation we had here. Shake his hand. Say thanks for serving.
And, whether or not it's this country, that country, we're all the same,
Exactly. Army, Navy, Marines,
Yeah.
doesn't matter.
I told you, that's why Italy lost the war, you remember, because they sent them stuffed shells. Nick all with the little meatballs.
Always thinking with the stuff.
Just wait for 10 seconds.
Okay. Do you need me to make any facial expressions?
No, but that's going in the bonus features.
Forward as you can.
I'm so glad I met me.
Yeah, so are we.
You know what I mean?